Hello, everybody. It's me, Jake, and I'm here. I am certainly here. Today, what I want to do is I am going to go through and show off my vinyl collection. Those of you who've been paying attention with the channel, I love you, have noticed that we've sort of steered towards music content in the past couple of months with the Jams and Tea podcast, and as such we kind of want to do a little bit more music-related stuff. So stuff like worst to best videos done by various members of the podcast is just going to be stuff that you find here, including me, Saoirse, Morgan, August, Tyler, who knows. And we might go and do film content every once in a while. It's really just, 2020 is a hellscape, and trying to predict where we'll be is very difficult. But right now, we've got to focus on music, and we're going to take it in that little direction. Don't abandon all hope if you joined onto this channel because of my movie stuff. That's not going away. It's just I'm putting it to the side a little bit. I like to talk about art of all variations here, and got my books, so that too. We're covering all the bases of art, all of the bases. But yeah, today I'm going to show off my vinyl collection because apparently people like it when other people do this. So I'm gonna. I did this years ago, back with my first Blu-ray collection, back when I had 10 Blu-rays. Now I have a lot more than that. Oh god, so much more. And I haven't been collecting vinyl for very long, just a couple of months really. Shout out to Morgan's dad, who let me have my my record player over there. That was really, really cool of you. And now I have roughly $1,000 worth of records. Love to see it. But we're just going to talk about all the albums that I have here, go over them real quick, to your amusement. Not quite a worst to best video, but I'm trying to make more content that's not podcast related that people want to see, and this is on the docket. And I wanted to talk about them, because, if you spend a lot of money on something, what's it any good if you can't show it off? First, let's start with the most recent addition to my collection. That is Tom Waits's Real Gone. Now, I'm going to upload my first worst to best before this. I haven't shot it yet, but I'm going to upload that first. And if you go see that, you'll see where this particular record places on that list. Spoiler, it's very high. It's a very, very high-placing record. And with good reason, too. I think this is one of Tom's most underappreciated records, just because it was after his 90s run. I believe this came out in 2003. And I own the remastered version, both because it's cheaper and because I like the remastered a bit more. I've come to understand that there are some purists who really love Real Gone in its original format just because it is a noisy, grimy, dirty-sounding album. And my issue really is that it is, but it sounds grimy and dirty enough on the remaster to the point where I listen to the old one and I'm just like, oh, all of the gooky white noise and lo-fi aesthetics kind of interfere with how great the instrumentation sounds on here. That said, I would still recommend listening to both versions to find the one you prefer. I prefer the remaster, but this is one of Tom's best records, and more people need to listen to it. It's got some of his best bangers. It's got songs like Hoist That Rag or Metropolitan Glide, which are just they're fucking crazy. This, even by Tom's standards, this is a weird fucking album. It is crazy, and it also has some of his more dirgy, mournful moments, and debatably his best song with The Day After Tomorrow. But it's a very eclectic, odd, noisy, clunky album filled with idiosyncrasy and personality, and that is why I love it so goddamn much. My Tom Waits dive this year has proved very, very fruitful, because his discography is one of the most enthusiastic plunges I've enjoyed in the past couple of years of me getting into music. Okay, next up we have... Ooh, okay, if you watch the podcast, you'll be somewhat familiar. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. My lighting's not great, but this little dark record here, this is Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. Not the last Phoebe Bridgers related vinyl we will see today. Again, if you've watched the podcast, you know what I think about this record, and I would highly recommend that you go watch that, just to see what we think, because it's one of our better discussions about this record. A podcast favorite, if you will. This, I believe, is the new record with the highest scored average between all 5 of us. There are 5 of us, right? It's not 6? 5? I don't remember. I forget about my friends. I'm a good friend. But this is my current album of the year, and I've talked about it very glowingly, and it may have only been out for a recent amount of time. But, again, if you watch the podcast, you'll know my connection to this runs so much deeper to the point where time does not matter. This is one of my favorite records of all time. Like it's really up there. Really far, if you get what I'm saying. But yeah, I won't go too in-depth to my thoughts, but this is a perfect album, and I love it more than words can describe. I think I've listened to this maybe, like, 40, maybe 50 times this year. Oops. Depression's a bitch, ladies and gentlemen. Next, another sort of podcast-adjacent album. This is Don't Fall in Love with Everyone You Meet by Ockerville River. Another one of my favorite records I've discovered this year, thanks to Tyler, primarily, because he got me to listen to Ockerville River's record Black Sheep Boy. And Black Sheep Boy is excellent. Check out that album. But this is Ockerville River's first album, and so far it is my favorite. It is an amazing folk, indie rock album. It's got this sort of traditional tinge. If you like, that sort of older folk rock music, this might do it for you, but it has distinctly modern sensibilities. It's a very well-produced album, very lavish and beautiful, and the songwriting is really what made me fall in love with this. There's a song on here called, I think it's Listening to Otis Redding at Home During Christmas is the song title, and it's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. One of my favorites, too. And it's not a huge, long record, but I have listened to this a lot this year as well, and it is a fucking amazing album. Check that out. Underrated. Now, ooh boy, this boy is thick. This is The Glowing Man by Swans. Swans, a post-rock darling band. They've been making music for, twice my lifetime, more than 30 years at this point, and this is one of the albums that they did their comeback with. This is, in the trilogy of albums they did their comeback with, specifically The Seer, To Be Kind, and The Glowing Man. And it's not my favorite Swans record. That is actually The Seer. This is my second favorite. It's this or White Light from the Mouth of Infinity. For very different reasons. I actually think To Be Kind is the weakest member of the newer trilogy, but it's a great record. But Glowing Man here is stunning. A post-rock opus. A 2-hour-long monolithic titan of tension building and explosivity. It is so fucking addictive, and if you're into this type of music, this is a guaranteed home run with you. It will not convert you if you're not a fan of post-rock, though, so, oops. Oh goodness, gotta arrange all my bullshit. Ooh, more podcast core. This is Everything's a Fever Dream. Now, we have a literal 4-hour podcast talking about the entire discography of the progressive indie pop band known as Everything, so you might have gathered that we are big fans. And this is, by the slimmest of margins, my favorite, just ahead of Get to Heaven. And I'd love to own Get to Heaven on vinyl, but that's fucking impossible because nowhere sells it, and the places that do, it's like $70, and I'm not paying $70 for one vinyl. But luckily, A Fever Dream here is not that expensive, so I got to indulge and get this. And it is my favorite just by a little bit. Definitely not the immediate record that Get to Heaven is, but it yields dividends. Man, like, fucking Night of the Long Knives and Desire, oh, good fucking tracks. Good fucking tracks, man. It's good shit. You love to hear it. More podcast content. Okay, this is Steven Wilson's The Raven Who Refused to Sing. Steven Wilson is the frontman of Porcupine Tree, my favorite band. As you know, if you've seen my worst to best on them that I made a couple years ago, which might be getting an update sometime soon. But yeah, this is from his solo work. He started doing solo work with Insurgents, and I think that was 2005, 6, 7, sometime around then. After Porcupine Tree had disbanded after the incident, and Insurgents is my favorite solo record of his. This and Hand Cannot Erase are basically tied for second place. His solo work is pretty fucking outstanding, even if I don't, like, love To the Bone or Grace for Drowning. This is a remarkably solid project. It has songs like Drive Home and Luminol. They are so fucking good, man. And Saoirse, actually, of the podcast, bought this for me, just because she's a good friend. Thank you, Saoirse. I love owning Steven Wilson's stuff on vinyl because he's a great producer, and his reissues and vinyl, like, mastering is just fucking perfect, and it's a beautiful sounding record. Great prog rock album. If you like shit like King Crimson or Porcupine Tree, this is essential listening. Essential. Next we have, this is The Cure's Ahead on the Door. It's the only Cure record I own, which is a bit disappointing considering they're like a top 5 band for me. Not the most popular pick, but this is my favorite Cure record. Mainly due to the fact that, like, I think it's all killer, no filler, and it's significantly shorter than Disintegration. And Disintegration is a fucking outstanding album, one of my favorites of all time. That said, it's long. It's a long album, whereas this is lean and mean, and it has the same potency, I think. It's not ahead of, say, Pornography or Disintegration, but it's my preferred one. You got hits like, is it 6 different ways? Yeah, it's 6 different ways. And then you have songs like Screw and The Baby Screams, which is just like weird experimental shit, and also has Push on here, which is my favorite song by The Cure. And, you know, listening to this is sublime. It's godlike. It's good. I love you, Roger Smith? I'm tired. Work was hard today. I don't remember my favorite musicians, apparently. I'll just call him Goth Daddy. Ooh. This is an important Jake Core record. This is Saturation 1 by Brockhampton. If you have heard me speak about music ever in general, I have most likely spoken at length about Brockhampton. Not as much recently, just because they, haven't come out with an album this year. We haven't really had a reason to talk about them, but I love Brockhampton. I know it's sort of like, it was really cool to like them when they came out with this record and Saturation 2 and Saturation 3 all in the same year. They released 3 full-length albums in 1 year, and all of them are amazing. They're all the same level of quality, and they don't really, they don't sell these on, Amazon, so I had to order it through Discogs and get it, shipped over from the United Kingdom. So, it's the only one of theirs I've bought that I, needed. It's not the last Brockhampton record I own. But this is an important record for me. It really it set with me really well. I thought it was good initially, and then it, something clicked inside me. I just started listening to Saturation 1, 2, and 3 over and over and over again. And God, I love these albums. I could listen to them on repeat for fucking ever. Some great new pop/hip-hop, rap, alternative R&B mixing to make this really dreamy but hard-hitting and cutting-edge series of records. Brockhampton, I love that band. They have a unique, youthful energy and perspective to them, and they touch on issues that I resonate with as a human being and as a struggling Gen XZ. What even generation am I? I'm 22. I don't fucking know. But this is the first one. It is not my favorite Saturation record, which is funny just because I think this is like a god tier album. But my favorite's actually Saturation 2, which I don't own yet. But I love coming back to this one because it's a dreamier and very, like, it invokes the feeling of summer. The first three Saturation albums, that's what it's like. And this is like a summer daydream of an album. But it's loaded with good cuts, and I love the Brockhampton boys. You know, I like stuff. Yay. Seriously though, if you haven't gotten on the Brockhampton train yet, do it. Even though, you know, it's kind of lame. Because I'm lame. This next record, ooh, this is Innuendo by Queen. I'm a massive fan of Queen. And I feel like in a weird juxtaposition that Queen is sort of an underrated band. Because, you know, if you say like, oh, Queen's an underrated band, people will be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Everybody knows Queen. Everybody walking the face of this fucking planet knows Queen. And that's true. But only for their singles. I mean, like, I don't hear their albums talked about at all, and frankly, that's a shame, just because I deem them to be better than a lot of their well-known singles. Records like Queen, the self-titled, and Queen 2, fucking masterpieces. I think I actually have Queen 2 over here. But this is, I think, 1990's Innuendo, which is an album by Queen, and it's my favorite Queen album. It has just, again, all killer, no filler, a very progressive edge to its sound. It has songs that are just absolute, like, ragers, like The Hitman, and The Show Must Go On is a, like, top-tier album closer. Like, that is some greatest of all time shit right there. And, yeah, it's just a very weird album in a way. They're more progressive, but Freddie's lyrics are, like, even more manic, and his performances are so impassioned and smooth. Deeply underrated record for a band that maybe doesn't get the due that they deserve in the way that they should, I say. Ooh, now we got an old one. I get some records from half-price books, because, you know, sometimes they have some gems. Like this one here. This is Relayer by Yes, progressive rock band Yes. I need to listen to more of their music, admittedly, but so far this is my favorite. Very expansive album. Again, also an underrated one. It kind of looks like crap just because this is like an original, or one of the original pressings of the record, which is, you know, it's like 40 fucking years ago. And it's great. Just, you know, if you have a classic prog inclination, you definitely owe this a visit. Ooh, more Essential Jake core. Queens of the Stone Ages, Like Clockwork. In my opinion, the best Queens of the Stone Age album, hot take, slightly, and maybe the best rock album of the 2010s, if you ask me. Queens of the Stone Age don't have a bad album in them. That's, you know, demonstrably not true. But this is my favorite. Most people tend to lean towards Songs for the Deaf, which is like a very, very close second, because it's a noisy, boisterous, energetic record, which it is. Boundary pushing. Also, like, headache-inducingly loud. But Like Clockwork here is a bit more restrained, it's a bit more tight, a bit more progressive in a lot of ways. And I feel like this direction for Queens is one that was worth exploring, because it appeals to me very well. Songs for the Deaf is more something it's super immediate and super, like, arresting and captivating, but this album, I sit with it, and it's emotional, and it's, like, I haven't really heard a record that sounds quite like it, and for rock music, that is a rare fucking thing to say. But yeah, I adore this album, like, a lot more than most people. I think even though it's genuinely considered a good record, and usually put up there with something like Lullabies to Paralyze, which I also love, but yeah, this is a short and sweet record, like a lean 40-something minutes. Great album art, too. Like, holy shit. Looks cool as hell. And, I don't know. It's just a really fucking good album. But yeah, I need to own more Queens of the Stone Age vinyl, though, just for the record. Oh, alrighty. Now I get to talk about In Rainbows. Radiohead. Super obscure band. Have you heard of them? I can't even fully make the joke. I mean, it's a fucking staple that any musically inclined idiot likes Radiohead. But, you know, Radiohead got me into music. I owe them a lot. And despite the fact that, again, like, Brockhampton, a bit sort of uncool to have this on, like, a high member, like, ranking of a list or whatever, or just talking about it in general. But I do take a little bit of pride in the fact that this is my favorite Radiohead album, as well as a top 10 of all time for me. Wasn't always the case. I used to be more of an OK Computer person. But this one, you know, In Rainbows is an appropriate title, just because this is a colorful record. It never stops being interesting. It never stops experimenting, but it's also very, very tight, very reined in. Like, every song is so fleshed out and fully formed, and it's just so beautiful. It's so nice to listen to. I know it's definitely considered upper-tier Radiohead, but I'm sad that it sort of gets pushed aside for Kid A and OK Computer, but this is a very important album for me, like sonically, but also emotionally. You got songs on here like Nude and Videotape, which are just two of the best songs the band ever made. But yeah, I like Radiohead. Shocking. And, ooh, I mentioned this one already. This is Queen 2. Queen 2 is like a decidedly more medieval kind of thing. Like they sort of had this. I think Freddie Mercury was actually writing a fantasy novel that he scrapped, and a lot of the concepts from that novel make it into his music, especially here. So it's like a fantasy epic rock opera going on here, and God, is it tasty. Like, the production, the guitar work by Brian May, just holy shit. And that's not to say anything about the actual vocal performances from Freddie. Like, this is just elite tier shit. Probably the most well-regarded Queen album, and deservedly so, honestly. Again, essential listening to all music fans of any stripe. Ooh. Can't really... Why is it like this? I didn't know that. It unfolds, but it's the wrong side. That's weird, man. That's fucking weird. Ooh. Showed this off on the podcast as well, but this is Still Life by progressive death metal band Opeth. And this is notable for two reasons. It's my second favorite Opeth album. Very, 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 very closely behind Damnation. There's some days where I feel like I might put this over it, but then I take a listen to Damnation and I'm like, ah, fuck, no, it's perfect. This is also perfect. Maybe the best progressive death metal album ever made. Yeah, probably. And this is probably my favorite album cover ever, too. It's just beautiful, like the intense saturated reds, and like the reflection that's like the cross is here and it's in the water. It's so beautiful. It's so pretty to look at. And the album itself is gorgeous. Like Ackerfeldt's demonic vocals being switched up to be his more like beautiful and melodious voice. The appeal of Opeth is that Mikael Ackerfeldt, the lead singer, the frontman of the band, has like a beautiful sounding clean voice that's just like unfucking paralleled. Like he's Freddie Mercury levels of ungodly talented. And then he can also go into a demonic growl, the likes of which you've never heard of. And this album balances it very well. It's a very sweeping, broad album with a tragic narrative, as the cover sort of implies. But if you want to get into progressive death metal, Opeth is where you start. I wouldn't start here just because it's a high point, but oh, Lord glory be, it's fucking something, let me tell you. Next up we have, oh goodness, my Fantano core is showing. Look, I like what I like. I will not apologize. But this is Kids See Ghosts, which was notable because Mr. Fantano gave it a 10, one of the 4 records he's given a 10 to in his YouTube career. So naturally I checked it out. And admittedly, it's super lame, but like, I kind of agree. This record's kind of perfect. And it's definitely my favorite Kanye project, and Miles' my favorite Cudi project, but I just think they bring out the best in each other, and in terms of just like a neo-psychedelic hip-hop album, this is just all I could ask for. It's only 20 or so minutes, it's like 20 and change minutes, but it is, all the songs are so fully formed and entertaining, and the length of it being short is part of the appeal to me, because when the songs are as well structured and put together as these, I can just listen to this so much over and over. I've definitely listened to this a lot. But yeah, definitely my favorite, and some pretty wicked cover art too. So, you know, that's nice. Then we have, ooh, Grace by Jeff Buckley. Jeff Buckley, notable for being the son of prolific jazz artist Tim Buckley. who tragically died young, I believe, which was foreboding considering Jeff here also tragically died at the young age of 27 in a river, which is a damn shame because Grace is, as a debut album, there's none better. This is maybe the most perfect rock record ever recorded, and I mean that with every fiber of my being. Not a super interesting pick for that, but like the progressive nature of this album is so ahead of its time, and man, Jeff, as a multi-instrumentalist, like, totally brings his A-game here. Like, this is a dense-sounding album. There's fucking accordions on here on things like Lover You Should Have Come Over, and it also has the cover of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, like the definitive version of that. And Jeff, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best, rock vocalist of all time. There are performances on here that just absolutely blow my mind still. And it's a very somber record, but like it's spiritual. It's one of the first albums I've ever listened to in full, and I can't recommend it enough. All-time favorite. It's weird though. I don't think I would buy a record that wasn't an all-time favorite. Like, you have to be at least like an 8 out of 10. I hate confining things to scores, but you know what I mean. Then I have something that's not like music as in like an album. It's the soundtrack to David Robert Mitchell's It Follows. Did I buy this just because of the cover? Yes. Okay, not entirely. It Follows, this soundtrack, fucking immaculate, by Disaster Peace, who also did the soundtrack to the indie game Fez, which this sounds very similar to in a lot of places, but this is just, like, immaculate synth work. Just, I listen to this shit all the time. It's terrifying, it's brutal, but it's also so smooth and silky and ominous, and it's fucking great. And, ooh. Now, here we go. This is one of the albums that I believe was in the bracket, which probably lost, which doesn't exactly surprise me. At least I think. But this is Angel Olsen's My Woman. I love Angel Olsen. She's a great singer-songwriter, and makes a lot of really great confessional music with, like, occasionally, like, a lower-fi kind of, like, vibe. Not on her recent record, All Mirrors, but that album is fucking great. You should listen to it. That's more of like a Baroque-ish album. But this is like pretty straightforwardly a rock album, more so than any other things. And I'm in love with this album. I think her songwriting's great. I think a lot of it is danceable and punky and fun. And then there's the lower, not the lower key cuts, but like there are songs on this album that touch on like real longing and heartbreak, like the opening Intern. And I just listen. This is a record I listen to over and over again in quarantine. Can't recommend it enough. Not often considered Angel's best. I think that people are a little bit more keen on All Mirrors and Burn Your Fire for No Witness, but I am nothing if not the weird outlier. Listen to this. It's pretty fucking great. Ooh. This is an album I mentioned on the podcast occasionally. This is Four of Arrows by Great Grandpa. It also serves as a beautiful, tangible reminder of Tyler and I. When we first really started talking on Twitter, we both listened to this album simultaneously. Like, I just saw him listening to it and was like, it's late at night, I'll give this a shot. And I did, and it ended up becoming one of my favorite records ever. One of the best albums of the year, in, I think it was 2019. Yeah, it was 2019. Some of the best, most layered indie rock I've ever heard, and the vocal performances, holy shit. Like, Dark Green Water, what a fucking opener. Just devastating record. Like, it's filled with genuine beauty and warmth, but also just sad, like, this mired, real human pain. Like, you can tell the band sort of broke up after their first album, then reunited, and this album is what stemmed from their loneliness. And it's great. It's immaculate. So, yeah. Ooh. Well, again, if you're a podcast member, you know about this one. Podcast member. Listener. This is Octahedron by the Mars Volta. Mars Volta, we did an entire episode on their discography. Go check that out. But, yeah, Octahedron and the Mars Volta are my second favorite band. And Octahedron is not the band's best album. In fact, it can be easily argued that it's their worst. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. It's sort of this amputexture just sort of fighting for opposite reasons of the bottom spot. But this is still an incredibly solid album, a great casual listen for a Mars Volta fan. It has pretty much everything you would want in one of these albums, except, like, the ambition, which, you know, that can be a turnoff, but I like how measured this album is, I like how contemplative it is, but I appreciate the rises in musical energy. And I own this one and not any of the other Mars Volta albums, because the other Mars Volta albums on vinyl are fucking ludicrously expensive to buy. Just disgusting. Please, Cedric, Omar, get in the studio with Steven Wilson or some shit and remaster those motherfuckers and put them on vinyl. I'll buy all of them. Just don't make me pay a fucking $100. I can't pay $250 for Francis the Mute. Are you fucking kidding me? Jesus. Oh, okay. This is a more interesting one. This is Igor by Tyler, the Creator. I'm not the world's biggest Tyler fan, because honestly, his early stuff, I don't vibe with at all. Odd Future, never been my cup of tea. In fact, all the shit heels I remember in high school were always wearing Odd Future merch, and they probably put me off the band more than I'd care to admit. But I like Tyler for the reason that he has a very definitive artistic arc in his albums. I feel like once he came out with Wolf, he's on the upswing now. He's maturing, and this is his most mature record. It's debatably not even a hip-hop album. It's really more of a neo-soul record, kind of mired in slightly lower-fi aesthetics, but it really works. I think I listened to Igor on, like, more than any other album last year, which is funny considering, like, I don't even think it brushed my top 5, but I love listening to this just because it is a pleasant experience. There's a theatricality here that he has. It's a weird, kind of conceptual album detailing a very toxic relationship that Tyler is involved in. And I love that perspective. You're sort of seeing this main character being brought to life through music, and it's fascinating. It's a great album. I go back and forth as to whether or not I like this or Flower Boy more. But I probably like Flower Boy just a teensy bit more, but it's not by much. I still love Igor a lot. Okay, ooh, I haven't even taken this one out of plastic yet. This is Fear of a Blank Planet by Porcupine Tree. Now, again, if you saw my video or have heard me talk about, like, anything ever, you'll know this is my favorite Porcupine Tree album. That has not changed. Fear of a Blank Planet is a excellent concept album. One of, like, this is, again, top 10 record for me. It's just almost a victory lap for Porcupine Tree in a way. It's just, like, this is the apex of everything they could do, and it's, like, generally kind of shorter than their other albums, which I also think is one of its strengths, but it has just such good songs on it, like fucking Way Out of Here, which is my favorite Porcupine Tree song, and, like, it's a dark, moody, brooding, almost adolescent at times feeling album, and it's made all the better for it. It's draped in angst, but told through the lens of this really intense progressive rock and progressive metal. And I just think it's perfect. It's so beautiful. And I'll go more in depth on it later, but again, this is my favorite record from my favorite band, and it's fucking outstanding. Next we have, that kind of reminds me of Igor in a way, with the black and white and the face. But this is Taboo by Denzel Curry. This is just a fan-fucking-tastic album. I've listened to this a lot too. It's sort of the Igor situation where I don't even think it broke my top 5 in the year it came out, but I still listen to it more than maybe the records that were above it. It's just so solid from front to back. I love Denzel's energy, I love how dark and moody this album is, but it goes so hard on other points. Like, there's a guest verse that JPEG Mafia comes in on, and that is the hardest shit I have ever heard. And I also believe Billie Eilish is on the song Sirens. A lot of good political stuff, a lot of good songs about depression, and it's an immaculate sounding record. Denzel's best, if you ask me, and that's not something I make lightly, considering I really, really like Denzel's other projects. But yeah, Taboo, kind of essential listening if you're a hip-hop head. Separating between Porcupine Tree albums. This is Lightbulb Sun by Porcupine Tree, my tied for first favorite album of theirs, and also in my top 10. It's not like a popular opinion to love this album as much as I do. It's often considered mid-tier, and I guess I kind of get it, but the amount of, like, the robustness of the sound here, you could argue that it's less focused, but it also leans into things like art rock and progressive rock and metal and occasionally psychedelic, and it feels like a watershed moment for the band. And it has so many great songs on it, and it's like a go-to I'm sad album to listen to, just because this has the vibe of being a lonely, depressed person who's in your feelings. And there's songs like Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth or Four Chords That Made a Million that just, they go hard, man. They're fucking great. Listen to Porcupine Tree, damn it. It's also a pretty accessible album. It gives you an idea of what their entire sort of sonic aesthetic is. This is my album of the year for 2019. This is Pup's Morbid Stuff. One of my favorite punk/pop-punk albums ever. Their other two albums are great, but this one specifically, it just captures that suburban American malaise so well, and it's so passionate and angry and bitter, and even, like, at points just a little too dark, but I appreciate it just because there's so much thematic heavy lifting that a genre that is notoriously not heady has to pull. And they do it flawlessly. It's a fun album, but it's also a sobering one. It's a mature punk record, but it has all of the livelihood and youth of something a bit more unhinged, I guess. But yeah, it's great songwriting, great hooks, like, weird, quirky, funny. I adore it. It's an amazing album. Next. Ooh! This one's a nice one to show off. Ooh, I should have shown off. I have a couple of these that are like, they're like clear vinyls. Oh my goodness, what is going on here? They're like multicolored vinyls. Actually, I think this Pup one is actually, is this blue? It's like a baby blue? Maybe? Yeah, look at that fucking shit. It is gorgeous. I believe Lightbulb Sun also has a clear vinyl. I won't get that. Let's see. Oh, the Denzel Curry one here. This is like a red, like, slushy type deal. Like, fucking look at how hot, like, and this, by the way, I think I bought this for like $17. Like, this was ridiculous. But it's got this little red slushy thing going on, and I love that shit. Give me more. The person you were looking at has a mental disorder. It's me, I'm person. This is Stranger Fruit by Zeal and Ardor. It was met with some acclaim when it came out, I think 2018. Was my album of the year for the longest time until something superseded it that I can't really remember at the moment, oddly enough. But this is a very high-ranking member of my favorites list. And not enough people know about it. I actually put this on the docket to be a future recommended album to talk about for the podcast, so look forward to that. But yeah, this is a very interesting album. It combines, like, black metal, electronic music, and soul, like spirituals. And the album has sort of a narrative theme of, like actual, like, slaves breaking the bonds of their white oppressors and using the devil, basically, to kill them. And it's such an enthralling mix. Like, you'd never feel like those genres would be cohesive, and yet they managed to do it. This is, again, all killer, no filler, a beautiful record. Not for everyone, but if you like stuff like Algiers, I'd give this a shot. But, oh my god, like, every time I listen to this album, I'm just in awe of how it's just like, how can I consider this anything less than perfect? It's a beautiful version of its own very lofty concept. And it's purple. I like purple. Yeah, the album's great. Go listen to it. It needs more love. This is one of the other albums I had to order, along with Saturation from overseas, because they don't technically sell them here. And this, of course, is Blonde by Frank Ocean. And I can't really say anything about this album that hasn't already been said before. Also one of my favorites, very Brockhampton adjacent in my opinion. Frank, if he could make another album, I'd say he was easily my favorite Odd Future guy, but I gotta say, I'd probably go with Earl Sweatshirt. But Blonde is still my favorite record of, like, all of that put together. I do think it's, like, perfect. It's an album that instantly makes me feel at ease. It makes me feel warm, it calms my nerves, and it's just beautiful, immaculate stuff. Like, there's so many people, like John Bryan, who does several film scores, including Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, has some producer credits on here, like vocal credits from people like fucking Beyonce. It's nuts! And I just, in terms of alternative R&B, I don't know how you could get better than this shit. It's so good. I've listened to it, you know, dozens of times, and I adore it. It's great. Top 20, maybe even top 15 kind of album. This I also believe is a clear vinyl. Yeah, it is. Just kind of take my word for it. This is Shushu. Their album plays the music of Twin Peaks. And if you're like, huh, that's an odd title, well, the title gives you everything you need to know. Shushu is sort of an experimental noise rock, post-rock. I don't know how to classify them, or him. I don't know if it's just him, like the front man, or if it involves other people, but basically, he rearranged all of the stuff from the Twin Peaks soundtrack, the show from David Lynch, original score by Angelo Badalamenti, and reinterpreted it in his style. And if you thought that the original soundtrack was creepy, this will, like, knock you on your ass. This is a disturbing sounding album. And again, with an album with, you know, little to no lyrics, it's impressive how they managed to do that. And boy howdy is it scary. Good mood music though. It's you know, listen to this at night when you're alone and you just want to vibe a little bit and maybe get a little spooked. Up next we have Jake classic and beloved album by pretty much everybody. David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. I mean, this is just the best art rock, glam rock album ever made. What do you want me to fucking explain? Yeah, basic pick for my favorite Bowie, but, like, when you have 5 years as your opening track, you can't be anything less than the best thing ever. It is my favorite Bowie. I've listened to it countless times. Not a particularly long album, but who Nelly, this is just a permanent canon album for me. I love the sounds. Bowie's one of my favorite artists in general. I need to own more of his stuff. But this is just him at his most grand and operatic and beautiful and strange, and it's a celebration of the genre and the musical aesthetics that Bowie, like, helped bring to fruition. And on a complete opposite note, we're getting bleak. This is Brand New's Science Fiction. Their most recent record, and probably last. If you don't know, Brand New frontman Jesse Lacey is an abominable human being, a disgusting person who did lots of awful things, and apparently was just not very well liked by a lot of people in general in the industry, which doesn't really surprise me. You know, Jesse Lacey, you know, took advantage of a younger fan, you know, earlier in his youth, and that may hinder people's enjoyment of it, and I wanted to put that out in the open just because I want people to know I'm not ignoring that. That said, the music of Brand New, the band, is very important to me. A band, one of the first few bands I properly got into, thanks to Morgan. His favorite record of all time when I met him was The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me, which, another favorite album of mine, but Science Fiction just edges out ever so slightly. I love it. I love the darker, fruitier aesthetics. It's a little bit less immediate than their other records, but I like that about it. It's an album mired in darkness, and just, you know, as somebody who suffers from anxiety and depression and self-harm problems, Brand New is a band that speaks to that a lot. And if I had to say which album of theirs did do the most, like, was the most Jake, it's definitely Science Fiction. You know, listen to it at your own risk. You know, maybe you can't separate the artist from the art, which is valid. Thankfully I can. This record came to me at a very important place in my life, right at the tail end, the first time I got my heart broken, so I listened to it a lot then. And we're going to continue the bleak stretch. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds Skeleton Tree. This album is something special. The fact that it's not my favorite Nick Cave album is just a testament to how much I love Nick Cave. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds is a top 3 band, and I might be making a video on them soon. Move these. Oh, this is heavy. Fuck. Don't work, retail kids. Oh God, the vinyls are spilling. No. Skeleton Tree. This is not my favorite Nick Cave album. Second place. I won't say what my favorite Nick Cave album is, because it'll spoil my worst to best. But this is a very well-regarded album in the popular music canon. This album is notable for Nick Cave. This was mostly written before the tragic death of his young son Arthur. But once it came to recording and the sonic aesthetics of the album, it tinged that. It was an album that was going to be, its own thing, and then Arthur died, and then it transformed the sound of this album. It is a despondent, often bright and beautiful record, but in a very oddly morose and dark way. There's so many things on this album that just reduce me to tears, like on I Need You. Some of Nick's best work overall, it's really the only thing keeping it from being my favorite, is the fact that it is extremely difficult to listen to if you're emotionally volatile, which I am. But it has some of his best work. You owe it to yourself to experience this at least once. One of his shorter albums, but good God, it hits like a freight train. It's got many emotions. And it's an interesting sonic detour for Nick. He built upon it with Ghosteen, and in pretty much all the ways that I wanted him to do that. So, but I'll leave the more in-depth discussion then. I also realized I just sort of totally left this behind. I picked it up and didn't talk about it. This is Beyond the Fleeting Gales by Crying. This is like electronic prog rock power pop? I don't know how to describe it. That said, Beyond the Fleeting Gales here is like a decade best contender for prog, indie, whatever niche it falls into. I also believe this is a yellow vinyl. Oh hell, there's lots of things in here. But yeah, it's yellow. I'm pretty sure this is the only album that Crying has released, and I want them to do another one because this one's fucking excellent. It's just so summery and beautiful and reassuring. I'd compare it a lot to early Coheed and Cambria, but also 80s era Rush. If you're into those things, you will fuck with this album. It's great. Tons of fun. Music can be fun. Doesn't always have to be about misery and tragedy. Ooh. I also have the deluxe edition of Good Kid, Mad City, because when I bought this, the deluxe edition was cheaper than the normal one. Don't know how that works. But yeah, Kendrick Lamar, one of my favorite current working artists, debatably the best in the game right now. Please, Kendrick, drop that new album. I really, really like it. This is also not my favorite Kendrick. Basic bitch take. I like To Pimp a Butterfly more. This is just sort of cheaper, and again, that's not to demean this. This is an exceptional album. A standout highlight from the 2010s. A concept narrative album about a young Kendrick Lamar living in Compton, growing up and having his inner turmoil testing, and it's just got so many good fucking songs, man. It flows so well, and it sounds so good, and Kendrick is just on top of it, man. He's this is I'd say this is Kendrick's Illmatic in a way. But yeah, it's great. Listen to it, even though you probably already have, because it's fucking Kendrick. Everybody's fucking listening to Kendrick. And on the complete opposite end of the musical spectrum in terms of white boy music, this is Father John Misty's I Love You, Honey Bear. I feel like I'm saying this a lot for the records here. This is not my favorite Father John Misty. That's probably God's favorite customer, which is similarly fantastic. But I Love You, Honey Bear here is a bit more aggressively psychedelic in many of its leanings, and in many ways electronic. Father John Misty is a very odd musician who I really, really love. I also really love pure comedy. But I Love You, Honey Bear is a really interesting deconstruction of the relationship that Josh found himself in with his significant other, and it stands as a monument to love and relationships, but also the darker parts are not ashamed, or like he's not gonna cast it aside to paint a more pretty picture. It's got a lot of ugly moments in it, exposing how shitty people can be, even when around their significant other. But yeah, this is great. It's probably the Father John Misty album I've heard the most, just because it's the easiest to digest, I think. It's not as heavy as pure comedy, but it's a great record. Definitely pick it up. And I was about to say watch that. That's not how music works. Here is Pearl Jam's 10. Now, interesting, the reason I own this album is because I was Christmas shopping last year, and I was like, what the fuck do I get Morgan? And I saw this was on sale at where I work. And I was like, shit, I should get that. And I just did, because it was on sale, and it was around Black Friday. So I was like, I don't know how much longer this is gonna be here. So I nabbed it. I was like, yo, Morgan, do you have 10 on vinyl? And he was like, yeah, why? And I was like, well, guess this is mine now. And I'm not gonna complain too much, because Pearl Jam, obviously one of the big four of grunge, I wouldn't confidently say this is their best album. I haven't listened to enough of them yet. I still need to give a more dedicated listen to something like Versus or Vitology or even the new album, which I really liked. But this is considered their best typically, and it's easy to see why. Pearl Jam, not my favorite member of the big four. That would be Soundgarden. I'm gonna get a Bad Motorfinger vinyl one day. Oh, one day. But this is just, like, again, all killer, no filler album, some of the most famous songs the band ever produced, and easily one of the best grunge albums of that era, or, real, any era. And then we go to, ooh, Clippings, There Existed an Addiction to Blood. I am genuinely shocked that this was not my album of the year, just because I think this is probably the best industrial hip-hop album of the decade. It's so, like, it's basically a horror movie, and it pays homage to things like the first song is basically built upon a John Carpenter synth score kind of thing. But I also believe that Daveed Diggs, on a, like, skill, lyricism, I think Daveed Diggs of Clipping is pretty much the best rapper to ever do it. Like, period. And this exemplifies that. It is a dark album, brooding album that is, like, just mired with scary horrorcore shit, and just amazing bars, great features, and like Clipping can make a beat out of anything, and they prove that here, and it's a wonderful sounding record, and my favorite of theirs to date, and I've listened to it a lot, like a lot. When it first leaked, I was all over it, and I still am. It's probably perfect, and I love it. One of my favorite 2010s records. Like, please, listen to it, and all their other records. Give my boys Clipping some love. More essential Jake Core. Meliora by Ghost. I am the biggest vocal advocate of Ghost. Morgan introduced me to them when I was first getting into music. And they're very theatrical, very arena rockish, but they also have some oddly progressive tendencies, some doom metal tendencies. I wouldn't classify them as doom metal, but heavy metal. And this album is perfect. One of the most perfect metal albums ever made, if you ask me. Just a solid track list. I even love the bonus tracks on here, but like the core record is so great. Songs like Cerise, it's so spooky and satanic, but also it's metal. The riffs are heavy and chunky, and they just fucking pummel you, and they're great. I just love listening to this thing, man. It's such a great gateway metal album, and it's so like tightly constructed in every way. Now we have a Morgancore record to change it up. This is Jason Isbell and the 400 Units, The Nashville Sound. We talked about the new Jason Isbell record, Reunions, on the podcast. Go watch that. But if you did watch it, you'll know that this is my favorite Jason Isbell record. Above even something like Something More Than Free or Southeastern. I think it's really just that this is such a tight track list, and all the songs feel so fully formed and cohesive. And Jason Isbell, one of the few bands Jason Isbell band, and the 400 Unit, one of the few acts I've seen live. I haven't been to many concerts, but I've been to, have I been to 2 now with Morgan? Maybe just 1. But yeah, there's so many great songs off of here. If We Were Vampires, one of the best, most beautiful songs ever written. Something to Love is fucking amazing. And just, I'm a southern boy, so the aesthetic of this record appeals to me. That said, just because it's Americana, don't let that put you off. This is way more in the vein of something like Springsteen or Dire Straits. It's energetic, it's fun, but it's also soulful. Isbell is such a great lyricist. It's not, the Americana where it's like, fucking singing about cars and girls and beer. Like, no, this is, like, thoughtful and contemplative, and, would be more comparable to something like Bob Dylan. And, yeah, it's a beautiful collection of tracks. Wonderful album. Ooh, very important 2 records here, since they're in sequence. I'll just talk about them both. This is Pink Floyd's The Wall and Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. It's a little black thing here, and I don't like to take it out because it's pretty. But yeah, these are my 2 favorite Pink Floyd records, basic though it may be. I do consider them both perfect. At one point, The Wall was like my favorite album in the whole world. And it's not far behind that, to be fair. But it's so ambitious and big. The movie is also great. And Wish You Were Here has like this, knowing the context of that album and knowing that they made it for their friend Syd Barrett, and like, it's just a beautiful record with so many good points on it. And the same can be said for The Wall. Great prog rock band, and albums like essential to the canon of music, and I love them both very, very dearly. They are Pink Floyd's The Wall specifically is kind of long, but I've heard it like a billion times, so obviously it's not enough to bother me. But yeah, my 2 favorites. This is a bit uncharacteristic so far. This is Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion. Maybe my favorite straight up like synth pop album. It's either that or The Weeknd's After Hours. I don't know if I can come down to a definitive conclusion on that, but Emotion. You've likely heard people talk about this record as being one of the more, like, it was not commercially successful for whatever reason, and it's loaded with hits. I mean, Run Away With Me is a contender for the best album opener in any album ever. And I love Carly. Her music's great. I'm just a sucker for synth pop. She has a great voice, and I first heard this record when I was on vacation at the very beginning of last year in Florida. So I have very vivid memories of driving around to these really impassioned, but also still mildly dark songs. But it's all about like freedom and living in the moment and all this, musical stuff. And I, would drive out in the middle of the night and there's palm trees and ocean air, and just brings me back to a better time. And it's a gorgeous pop album. What more do you need? And I knew this is not the funny. These 2 are the other Phoebe Bridgers projects I alluded to. This is Stranger in the Alps, her debut album. Smoke Signals, one of the best songs of all time, honestly. It's also one of my favorites, like very high up there now, because again, on the podcast with Punisher, I talk about why this is a very personal album to me. And I love every song here. I love everything about the way Phoebe sounds and her sonic influences, and I love this record to bits. It's an amazing album, and if you want to get into Phoebe, that's not a bad place to start. But then we also have Boy Genius, which is a collaboration between Phoebe, Julian Baker, and Lucy Dacus, who all kind of inhabit the same kind of indie singer-songwriter, vaguely folk-adjacent acts that show up, and they just sort of team together to collaborate on this EP. And the Boy Genius EP, which is probably my favorite EP, maybe next to FKA Twigs, is Melissa. But yeah, this is a collection of just a couple songs, but they are some of the best shit you will ever hear for this genre. Like, absolutely essential listening if you are a fan of Phoebe, Lucy, or Julian. Also, listen to Julian Baker. I need to own a vinyl of hers ASAP. Flying Lotus's Flamagra. This is an odd record to own, because Flying Lotus, very acclaimed guy, very popular in the music sphere, but typically when you see a Flying Lotus album, like in somebody's like Topster favorite movies, favorite albums lists, you get like a Cosmogramma or a You're Dead or, anything. Flamagra was received rather lukewarmly comparatively, and yet it is my favorite project from Flying Lotus. I love how psychedelic and rickety this is. It feels like you're like walking around in this weird, bizarre house that is on the cover, like just going into a room with different oddities, and it's like got these like driving sort of like dreamy passages that are interlocked with these like mechanical sort of bits of like machinery like powering through, like you're discovering like this monolithic machine that can like do weird shit. And yeah, I love this a lot. It's an amazing album to hear on vinyl, so give it more love. Give it more love, it's great. And now, more Morgan core, although this is Morgan and Jake core now. This is the Menzingers on the Impossible Past, and the Menzingers need to be talked about more, frankly. They are one of the most consistently solid punk rock groups of the last decade or so. Every album of theirs is at least some shade of great, and this is my favorite of theirs. Not that that's by much. I also adore Rented World, After the Party, and Hello Exile. But there's something about this one that just, it sticks with you. They've got so much energy here, so much great songwriting. Like, the Menzingers songwriting is so, beautiful and soulful and, way more than it has any right to be, and I think that's a lot of the appeal. They even have some sort of a heartland rock appeal, too, kind of like the Gaslight Anthem. But, yeah. Go listen to this if you haven't. It's not very long, but it's one of the best punk records ever made. Maybe even my favorite, who knows. And as I mentioned, FKA Twigs and Half Price Books earlier, I got this at Half Price Books, which is in terrific condition, and the vinyl plays just fine. It was like $10, which is ridiculous, because LP1 here by FKA Twigs is a, just fucking killer record. I do prefer her EP Melissa, and her most recent album Magdalene, which is Magdalene is immaculate. That is a, just all-time great album. And it's a bit ahead of this for me, but that said, it's not saying much, because this is a great album, a great art pop kind of thing. Twigs' voice is so fucking beautiful, and that could carry it alone, but the production, partly in courtesy by Arca, whose album we recently covered, is also similarly immaculate, and I love it to death. And yes, the other Brockhampton album. This is Iridescence. Very important album to me. If you've seen my top 10 songs of 2018, you will know my favorite song of that year was Tanya, off of this, which is my favorite Brockhampton song, and a top 5 song of all time. And yeah, Iridescence here is a very important record to me, which is funny because it is, universally considered Brockhampton's weakest, album project. Nobody likes this album as much as, say, I do, or even someone, I think Tyler does. But it's an album that is like a dark reflection of the Saturation albums. It is glitchier, it is noisier, it is way more somber, and that's sort of what leads me to it, is that it's so emotionally resonant. You feel every single, like, thing on this album that, like, the boys want to get across. And it's some of their most eclectic and interesting production. Just an amazing crop of songs, with so many good tracks, like the opening track, the way it flows directly into Thug Life. Oh man, I could talk about this album forever, and I will one day want to make a Brockhampton video, if we don't do a B-sides on them, which I'm sure we will do eventually, just because they can't pass that opportunity up. I will do a Brockhampton Worst to Best, though, if that doesn't happen. But, yeah, I love this record so much. It is a weird album, it's very idiosyncratic, but this is my third favorite album ever made, and I adore it. Even if no one else does, I do. And now we have... I remember saying earlier, I don't know why I'd buy an album if it wasn't one of my favorites, and this is the sole exception. Mainly because I think the price tag is here. Yeah, this was $1.99. And the only thing I know about Neil Diamond Stones is that If You Go Away is on this album. And If You Go Away was used in a season of Mr. Robot, my favorite television show. And I was like, God, I need to listen to that song, and I discovered it was on this album. And, yeah, the album's not good. It kind of sucks. It's bad. But that said, I just wanted to have If You Go Away on there, and that's nice. It was so cheap, I just couldn't resist. But yeah, not a great Neil Diamond album, but whatever. And speaking of Mr. Robot, wow, what an amazing segue. This is Volume 1 of the Mac Quayle score. Mr. Robot's soundtrack is, like, a work of art unto itself. An amazing feat from Mac Quayle. And this is, like, Volume 1, it's like the first half of the first season. And I love it. It's great. I love to listen to this while writing. It's very Aphex Twin-ish, very electronic, very, I'd almost say it's, at times, kind of like Octahedron. If Tyler's watching this, his ears just perked up. But it's a very oppressive score in a very good way, I find. And sadly, that is it. Though I will say, I was by now supposed to have a vinyl of my favorite Nick Cave album, but it got lost in the mail, so I am waiting to get a refund for that, so that's sad. But yeah, that was my vinyl collection, and I hope you enjoyed me rambling about a bunch of albums I really love, and Stones. But yeah, take care, let me know what kind of videos and music stuff you want to see in the comments below. Talk about fucking anything. Talk about a B-sides you want us to do on a particular artist, or somebody you want us to cover, or something. Or just a worst to best. We are all going to be doing those. I think Saoirse is going to have the first one up. I believe she's doing Biffy Clyro. By the time this is edited and on the channel, I'm sure that might already even be up. But, yeah. Stay frosty, my dudes. All around me are familiar faces, worn out faces.